Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Green Party MPs, I'm very happy to welcome you this morning to the Swedish Parliament and one of our old chambers for this very timely discussion on a topic most important for future policies and therefore of interest to all. I found it even more interesting to be listening this day to a topic which you have set to yourself to present indicators, not only for the global crisis, but also for the global opportunities. So with that inspiring set of agenda for today, I think we will have a very nice day, and I hope that this surrounding will help us to a fruitful meeting.
Thank you very much, Rosa. My name is Jens Holm. I'm a member of the Swedish Parliament. I'm also Vice President of Globe Sweden. Globe is an international network of environmentally engaged politicians worldwide. We try to push as much as we can for environment, for better legislation when it comes to climate change. I'm very proud to announce that quite recently Mexico adopted a new climate law, and that was in very tight cooperation with the Globe representatives. I'd like to mention a few practical things. Toilets are out to the right. We have a program, and you can all see in the program that we have a coffee break, 10:55. Later we have a lunch. Coffee and lunch will be held out here and in the corridor. If you need to leave earlier, you can do so, but we would recommend that you leave in the breaks, so in the coffee break or during the lunch. When it comes to climate change, I think all of us in here, we are aware about the huge challenge we have ahead. And we are aware that we need a much stronger political leadership to solve this big challenge. I'd like to do something, for me, very unusual. I'd like to quote the Swedish king. Last week we had the formal opening of the Swedish Riksdag, and Carl II Gustav, he said, "Everything is growing. Economies are growing. Population is growing. But the planet doesn't grow." I think that's quite true. The planet doesn't grow. We have only one planet. We have to find models which are within the boundaries of this planet. With those words, I'm happy to give the word to Dennis Pamlin. Thank you.
A warm thank you to Jens Holm and Åsa Romson for hosting us in the Swedish Parliament today. Because without knowing a parliamentarian, you would not be allowed into these fantastic rooms and in the second chamber. My name is Margot Wallström, and I'm a member of the board of the Global Challenges Foundation and also the spokesperson for this foundation, and it is a pleasure and an honor to be able to welcome all of you to today's conference. Of course, we are also happy that what Åsa and Jens did represents the network of parliamentarians through Globe, for example, that are willing to address the problem of climate change and working over party lines to find ways forward. We, of course, are happy to see here such a unique combination of skills, many that so far has not been part of the climate discussion. And we think that they deserve the attention that we hope to be able to give them here today, because we have in this room leading experts from the financial sector, national security experts, business leaders, scientists, policymakers and NGOs who all in different ways are trying to help reduce emissions. Of course, I also would like to say a special welcome to ambassadors and representatives of embassies here in Stockholm. And of course want to welcome the excellent panelists who are all world leading in their fields. And we are grateful that they have found time in their very busy schedules to come from different corners of the world to participate in today's event. And just to make a short presentation, as they are seated here on the podium, you can see Dennis Pamlin, who is a project manager of Global Challenges Foundation. He will very soon present the risk indicator. And at his side, Johan Rockström, Executive Director of Stockholm Resilience Center. Bill Hare, welcome. He is the founder and CEO of Climate Analytics. And Kenneth Benedict, who is the Executive Director and publisher of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. And we will have on a video also the participation of Pan Yehua, who is the Professor of Economics and the Director for the Institute for Urban and Environmental Studies at China's Academy of Social Sciences. Today, in conjunction with the IPCC release, we will launch the Global Risk Indicator and hopefully contribute to a much needed paradigm shift where climate change is seen as a global risk, but a risk that drives innovation and sustainable economic development. As all modern events, I should say to begin with also, we have a hashtag for those of you who Twitter. So for today we have @GlobalChallenges, and I think you will see a sign also there on the podium. In the first session, we will have contributions that put the global risks into a broader context. Maybe you will not be able to read it, but we will just put some pictures up for you to be able to follow the thinking and the planning of today's event. So we will look at the global risks in the first session. In the second session, we will listen to contributions from experts from the financial sector. And the third session then will look at risk from a security and global governance perspective. The final session, we will focus on concrete next steps from here. And in that final session, we will also formally launch the Global Risk and Opportunity Indicator with the numbers from IPCC's report that, if everything goes according to plan, will be official in an hour's time. And we will also present finally the Stockholm 2013 Global Risk Declaration. I hope you have, I think the programs have been distributed so you can follow. I guess that many of us who have been active and participating in the debate on climate change sometimes have wished for a magician and loads of money to be able to address the problem. This is exactly what we have in the Global Challenges Foundation, because we have Laszlo Szombatfalvi, and what many might not know is that he once upon a time was a professional magician. Through him, I want through presenting him, I want to give a bit of background to the Global Challenges Foundation. He became an icon in the financial community here in Sweden, but Laszlo has kept away from the public eye until now, and he still insists that ideas are more important than individuals, something that is quite unique these days. He was born in Budapest in 1927. Following the Hungarian revolt in 1956, he fled the country and came to Sweden as a refugee. He became well known and respected, to say the least, on the Swedish stock market for his systematic method of risk assessment. And in 1987, he left the stock market and retired from active business. Since then, he reflected on moral decisions. This resulted in a book about critical choices, where the final chapter became a separate book, The Greatest Challenges of Our Time. And you can find some examples of the book, copies of the book there. So please help yourselves to a book. During the last years, Laszlo has been concentrating on applying his risk-oriented approach to identifying and analyzing humanity's current major problems. And in 2011, he established the Global Challenges Foundation and put his fortune into the foundation, wanting to use his fortune to, for example, fight climate change, or what he calls the global challenges. The book, The Greatest Challenges of Our Time, that provides much of the guidance for the foundation, is available in 6 languages and have been read by leading decision makers around the world. The foundation that was created in 2011 is based on the fact that the world community has created severe problems and threats to mankind associated with enormous risks. Climate change, as we've mentioned, other environmental damage, political violence, in combination with weapons of mass destruction, and of course severe poverty. And with unsustainable consumption patterns spreading around the world, a population that will grow to 9 to 10 billion by 2050, this will increase the pressures further. The foundation have 2 different but mutually supportive goals. First, to facilitate political decisions to effective measures against global risks, and do this by increase the public awareness about global risks and their dimensions. And secondly, by strengthening global cooperation and accelerating the development of a 21st century global governance system. The strategy behind the foundation is based on Laszlo's rigorous and systematic work to analyze and understand the complex relations between global risks, their causes and correlations. This is a nightmarish picture to present like this. We are not, well, yes, we will give you a test afterwards when you leave. But this is just to say that on this image taken from the book, The Greatest Challenges of Our Time, just illustrates the complexity climate change is highlighted in the circle, and the need for a systematic and integrated approach is obvious when the global challenges are seen together. And if you haven't yet read the book, it can also be downloaded from the Foundation's webpage at no cost. It is also in this reality that the global risk and opportunities should be viewed. From the Foundation's perspective, it is also a part of our work to help support a global governance system for the 21st century that is capable of addressing things that are the greatest challenges of our time. The indicator is one part, but the Foundation also have other projects underway that will explore different ways to strengthen global collaborations in this important area. So this is a little of the background, and we are happy to have Laszlo here for this morning's session. Now it's immediately time to take a closer look at the main reason we have gathered here today, a global risk perspective and the launch of the Global Risk and Opportunity Indicator. So I will, with no further ado, hand over to Dennis Pamlin, who is the project manager at the Global Challenges Foundation and the one who led the development of the indicator. Once again, a warm welcome to all of you. We are very proud and happy that you wanted to join us for what we hope will be a fruitful discussion over this Friday. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret, for that introduction. What I'm going to try to do here in 20 minutes is to give an overview of this indicator that on the one hand is an attempt to be very clear on what's here, on the other hand be very rigorous on the science behind that. So the goal with this indicator is twofold also. As Margaret was alluding to earlier, the purpose of the foundation is both to look at the global governance system and how this kind of initiative can be a part of building a better global governance system, as well as helping people to understand the magnitude of the challenge we're facing. So the objective is then to develop a tool that will be easily understood to illustrate these risks. And I think many people have not really fully understood the kind of challenges we are facing. And that's a little bit what I'm going to talk about here now. But the first thing is to understand a little bit what is risk. When we talk about it in everyday life, risk can mean many things. But from a risk perspective, risk is when you multiply the probability with the impact. And this is very, very important, because this means that if the impact is very, very severe, if we're talking about something that really threatens human civilization as we know it, then it doesn't really matter if the probability is very, very low. The risk is still very high. And this is something that we tend to forget sometimes. We say that the risk is low when we mean that the probability is low. And by risk, you get a better understanding on where you should focus, because these two things always must be seen together. And if you look at climate, and Bill here will, and Johan will talk more about this later, the kind of impact we will see if the world would reach 4 degrees or 6 degrees or even more are almost unthinkable. So, and we will see, sea level rise that could be really catastrophic. We can see water scarcity, risk for global food security, regional extinction of species and coral reefs, and large-scale biodiversity loss. We can really start shaking this planet in a state where we don't know what's going to happen. So that is why we look on the impact side. That means that this is so severe that even if it's low probability, we need to look at this. And what about the probability then? Again, this is something that some of you who have been following the IPCC might have seen, but in the general discussion it's often forgotten. We talk about it will lead to 2 degrees, it will lead to 3 degrees. But always, this is about probability. Usually IPCC talks about 66% probability. What we talk about is what about the 34 other percent? Some of those might be less dangerous, but some of them might be a lot more dangerous. So this what is called the tail that goes out from this distribution that we really must understand. And what is happening now, if you think about this uncertainty and what we do with the planet, is that we are putting so much CO2 into the atmosphere and greenhouse gases that this curve is moving up. And that means that this very low probability earlier has started to become not so low anymore. Now we're starting to talk about full percentage or even more for these really catastrophic events. And for the first time, in a couple of million years, probably this year, we saw carbon emissions concentration in the atmosphere reaching 400 ppms. And when we talk about these things that haven't happened in millions of years, we can understand that we are facing is something that is really unique, and that's something that really requires reflections. And if we look at where we're heading, things start to get really scary. Many of you have heard about the International Energy Agency talking about a 6-degree world, etc. That if we continue to do what we do, we don't have much of a future for us. So the question is not if we're going to change, it's how fast we're going to change. So taking all this complexity, we thought that what is the best way for us then to introduce a global risk indicator? Should we look at the most scary reports? Should we look at the most optimistic reports? And then, well, obvious for climate, we have something fantastic, and this day, more than any other day, the IPCC. It's a unique global collaboration to really try to assess this. And from a risk perspective, this is also very interesting, because what the IPCC does is trying to gather the knowledge and find the closest you can come to consensus. And when you talk about risk assessment, it's very important to understand systemic risk. If you have a single study that can show that it's very dangerous or not dangerous at all, there's a tendency to that can be a misunderstanding. There can be a systemic error in that. But if you bring a lot of studies together, like the IPCC is doing, that systemic errors tends to cancel out. So we started with the IPCC. What do they actually say? And then how do we translate that into probability numbers? And actually the numbers are there. It's not just being interpreted from a risk perspective. So it wasn't that much we needed to do. It was basically asking the scientists to do what they've already done. And what they have done so far, and this you cannot see. And for me, this is a little bit of symptomatic of how scientists tend to be very clear, very scientific in their perspective. But for most people, when you see something like that, it doesn't mean anything. So the first thing we said then is, okay, so Laszlo, for instance, of course, he looks at this and say, wow, this is really important and serious. People must act. But for most people looking at that, they just turn it away and say, what's on TV and what's the next thing? So how do you translate these kind of complexities into something that most people understand? But we started a process also to make sure that the policymakers who are working on that are acknowledging that. So together with the basic countries, we attended the Conference of Parties, the big climate conferences, to discuss this. And it was really interesting to see many of the negotiators also saying that we have acknowledged that these risks are really dangerous and we need to work with that. But we haven't really seen a pressure. We haven't really seen someone who's helping us to put this on the agenda. So it was a great support from the policymakers. And then we also said, but how do you actually communicate this? And we had a joint work together with the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, where we tried to bring some of the best communicators who've been looking at global risk together and say, how do we communicate this? How do you make it easy enough to understand, but rigorous enough to be clear on the science? So after that process then, we then introduced and have now the Global Risk and Opportunity Indicator. And what that tried to do is just to, in a very visual way, because that's the numbers, most people don't like numbers. If you have something that indicates something, you get a feeling of what's happening. But the most important thing, I think, with this indicator is comparison. When you say, for instance, that the old IPCC reports for 450 ppm would result in 6 degrees with 1.8%. If I say, look, it's 1.8%, most journalists, policymakers say 1.18%, that's nothing. You know, who cares about those kind of low numbers? But if you compare that with fatal plane accidents, when you see people dying in airplane accidents, the probability for that happening is 1 in a million. There are about 30 million flights going up, and of those, 30 every year. If you compare that, if you would say that for airlines, if you put yourself on a flight and go away and say, let's fly with 1.8% probability of this plane crashing, we would have a situation where globally you would have more than 500,000 planes crashing every year. That would be 62 accidents an hour around the world. There are very few people who would fly in that situation. But still, that's the kind of risk we're now putting on these really extreme climate events. And then, in the afternoon, we will talk about what actually happens here with R4 or R5. What are the latest numbers? They were agreed 5:30 this morning, but IPCC will present them officially at 10 o'clock. So when they have done that, we will present our data. But before I hand over to the next speaker, I just wanted to explain a little bit about the next steps also. Where are we going from this? The response has been fantastic, and we have a bit of a challenge now to see what are the best opportunities to take this forward. But one of the things that we felt are important is to illustrate the climate impact. So what does these temperatures actually mean, if you translate that? And the IPCC process, as some of you might know, is that we now had Working Group 1 presenting the basic science around climate change. Working Group 2 will then present the impacts. So we will follow that and add to the indicator. But we will also in parallel start looking at other global risks. Nuclear warfare, pandemics, life science. Can we use the similar approach, and how can we start looking at getting real numbers out of that? And we have encountered many groups who feel that the time is right now to bring these global challenges up on the global discussions. So, and then after that, we also continue, and as you have noticed, the name is the Global Risk and Opportunity Indicator. These are opportunities being presented by solving this. And in the last IPCC report, that's the focus. How do we actually deal? How do we mitigate? How do we reduce emissions? So that's what we're also going to add to that. And then finally, the links between the global risks. And this is where I think Lasso has done something that is very unique. Basically, at least since the Second World War, the institutions on the global level has been very compartmentalized. You know, you have trade in one area, you had financial in one area, biodiversity in another area. It's very little really coherence between these. And what is happening when you take different decisions? What happens if you want to take a lot of biodiversity away and use for bioenergy, or if you build a lot of nuclear power plants? What happens if you don't oversee those? Will that impact the spreading of nuclear weapons? Will pandemics spread more quickly if we go into forest in a way that is not very thought through? So this is very important, and the complex image that Margaret showed earlier is really important, because it's the way of trying to understand that these risks actually affect each other. So, and finally, I just want to, the foundation is very much a bridge builder, trying to see how we can bring what you can almost call the common sense among scientists about these challenges, and how we bring that out to people who can act. And that's why this group is so important also. Security policy experts, financial people, the people who actually decide what we should do in the future. For climate change, that is absolutely necessary. But there are other groups. So we're really reaching out a hand to you if you think this is important. How can we work together? How can we translate this in different ways? So, yeah, that's where I'm going to end. And thank you for coming. And maybe some of you were also up 5:30 in the morning waiting for IPCC. So good to see you all here. Thank you.